Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching the podcast Tell Me Your Story. This is your host, Chris Baker, and today's special guest is Melvin Davis. Give it up for him. Give him a round of applause. Today, like how we normally do, we're just gonna kind of jump into this and talk about the very beginning, like where it started for you, where you grew up at, how many brothers and sisters you got, all that good juicy stuff, childhood. Go ahead, Melvin. Take it over.
So I'm born and raised in the Cleveland, Ohio area, specifically the inner city parts of Cleveland. I was raised as an only child in terms of my household, but I have a half brother and a half sister from my biological father, and a step brother and a stepsister from my stepfather, who, for my purposes, is my dad. Him and my mom been together since I was 15 months old, so that's dad. But they live in Memphis, so essentially I grew up as an only child.
Oh man, you spoiled.
I would love to have been, but no.
That's what I always hear from everybody else. They said being that I was an
Yeah,
only child, I had no other brothers and sisters, so my parents spoiled me. I got the royal
I
treatment.
think so. I think my parents were both always on the minds, especially when you're growing up, in the inner city. There's just not a whole lot of money, to begin with. But I didn't really notice that we didn't have a whole lot of money because we had either as much or more than everybody that lived around us. So it wasn't until I got a chance to go outside of my neighborhood and stay with some family members that stayed out in the suburbs that I was like, oh, wait a minute. We don't have this. We don't have that. But you don't really notice it, when you're younger, So, it is what it is. But I was never spoiled. I got my first job at 15, and I've been working ever since I'm 50 now. So I've been working, for the last 35 years, and that's just kind of how it's been. My parents kind of set that mindset that, you got to work in order for you to be able to provide for yourself. And if you have a family one day, you got to be able to take care of a family. And so you have to do what you have to do, and my mom's mindset was always, both of my parents both worked at factories for 40 plus years. They both retired a couple years ago. But their mindset was always, we're going to do what we need to do to put you in a better position so that you don't have to do what we do. And so they paid those dues so that I could go to college and do the things that I do and have more of a white collar work experience rather than that blue collar work experience that they've had, so that I can give my children, a better life. And I'm like, and that's how things have to start. One generation has to pay the dues for the next generation, and eventually, the family will be well off. So my kids will have a very different, upbringing than anything close to what I've had. And that's the goal. And that couldn't have happened without my parents doing their part.
Yeah, when you look back at your childhood and at the time you said it yourself, you didn't really see it or anything different from the neighborhood. But as you got older now, and as you're looking back on it, as your parents brought you up and how they raised you and how they made ends meet without it being like anything special, has that really helped you in your parenting at all?
I think the main example that I've always gotten from watching my parents, and one of the things I think that I really, because I never went without anything growing up, so we stayed in the projects of Cleveland, but both of my parents had a full-time job, and that was unusual, in our neighborhood. One, it was unusual to have both of your parents there. Most of my closest friends pretty much were in single mom households. So the fact that my dad was there and then they both had a job. So that, that gave me some access to some things that some of my friends, didn't have. So from all what I knew for what I needed, growing up in the 70s, we had it, and I mean, so it wasn't, no, wasn't that big. It wasn't that big a deal. Wasn't that big a deal to me. But they set the example in terms of just work ethic.
Yeah.
What you have to do. You have to get up. You got to go to work. You got to do things that you might not want to do so that you can take care of the things that you have to take care of. And I think that's invaluable. And that's something that a lot, especially this generation now, that has more of an entitlement mindset than how it was when I was growing up. You didn't have that entitlement generate that mindset because our parents and people older than our parents, made sure that you didn't think that way.
Yeah, and that's like you touched on a really key note is like this generation does miss that. And it kind of lacks it, I should say, is because like our generation, we're brought up working class. If you want something, you have to go out there and earn it. As for now, it's kind of like the opposite. The kids think it just needs to be handed to them, and it's like we need to get back to teaching that you need to work for it. If you in order to get something, you have to work to get that. And that's
Mhm.
awesome that your parents taught you that. Now you can pass it on to your kids, and hopefully they pass it on to their kids. Keep
Absolutely,
it going.
absolutely. I don't, I've always said like, especially with my 10-year-old now, I don't want her to have to, go get a job at 15 the way that I did. That's certainly not part of the work ethic part that I want, to pass on to her, but, in terms of when she's ready to be out on her own, I want her to be ready, so being, I'll always tell people she's spoiled, but she's not spoiled rotten, and to
Yeah,
me, those are very different things. Being spoiled means she'll get more things than other people get, but that's because not only is she growing up as an only child, I mean, she has three siblings, but they're adults and live in their own house. So, for all intents and purposes, she's growing up as an only child, but she's also the only grandchild.
yeah,
So she's spoiled across the board. She gets pretty much whatever she wants. She's a straight A student, so there's no reason for to ever pretty much deny anything that she asked for, as long as it's within reason. Somebody's gonna get it for her. That's just how it is. And once she figured out that, hey, if I keep getting great grades, I can pretty much get whatever I want. So she's motivated.
yeah. You're on the right path. You're on the right path. But I would also say too is like because she's got older siblings, she's got mentors. People that are
Mhm.
out there, they're living it, and they can kind of show what they've gone through and what they lived through in life, and now they can teach that to the younger sibling.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That is definitely true.
So that's awesome. um, kind of let's step back, go a little bit back. Let's talk about your childhood. Just like what was it like growing up in the projects?
I'd say you kind of get a feel pretty quickly growing up in the projects that okay, things are kind of dangerous. You gotta kind of be aware of your surroundings at all time, who's around, what's going on. There's certain things that you can and cannot do, and you figure that out pretty quickly. That's probably by the time you're probably 6, 7 years old, you got the lay of the land. You know what's to be expected of you. You know what you can and cannot do. You know what the consequences will be if you do, certain things. And you just figure that out. I think probably the hardest, as I look back now, one of the hardest things I remember telling teachers when I was in like fifth or sixth grade that I wanted to be a lawyer. And my guidance counselor told me that I needed to choose something else. I needed to be reasonable because given where I live, there was practically no chance that I would ever be able to do that. And I think 2 days after I graduated from law school, I went back to that school and I found that guidance counselor and I showed him my law school degree. I said, you told me that I would never be able to do this, because I lived in the projects. And I just want you to know I did it in spite of what you said.
The crazy part is, like, when you said that, it made me think of Steve Harvey's story too, where he was telling everybody in his class that he wanted to be on TV. He was like,
Mm-hmm.
one day I want to be on TV. And like as soon as you said that, it was like the same story was popping in my head. That, she was telling him like, what makes you think that you're gonna be on TV? Huh? Compared to everybody else in your class, pretty much made him look like a fool. And then he said every Christmas he buys her a TV to show her that he's on TV. That was like the ultimate thing. Get
Yeah.
her a brand new TV or say, hey, that's me on that TV. So that I mean, pretty much the same thing, your teacher telling you that you're gonna be a lawyer because of where you live. She's judging you by, just where you're at. But you didn't let that stop, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what I one of the things that I try to tell young people, now I said, unfortunately, everybody isn't going to be in your corner. There are going to be people that are going to doubt what you can and cannot do based on whatever qualities that they see in you, where you live at, the color of your skin, who your parents are, what type of school, you go to. I said people are just going to make judgments
Yes.
based on very little information, but that's what they're going to do, and that's just a part of how life is, but you can't let other people determine what your aptitude or your altitude is going to be.
Yep, no matter what you're chasing after, you're always gonna have your doubters. You got people that don't believe in it, don't see you achieving it, but you got to stay committed to your goals and chase after your dreams and make it happen. Don't let people doubt you, because the sky is the limit, man.
Absolutely.
Like I said many times before, you got all this greatness inside you. Let it go, man. Show it to the world. Let it blossom. God's blessed you with it. For let's ask for people that are not familiar with the projects at all, kind of give them a feel what it's like. Like people that have no idea what that even means. What's it like living in the projects? Kind of explain that to them.
I'd say any inner city environment, I think, regardless of what city, it's in, when one of the things that I found out pretty quickly when I was in my undergraduate years at Ohio State, and Ohio State was culture shock for me, for one, here I am, I'm on a campus with 60,000 other students. That was different. I mean, I got classes that it may take you 20 minutes to walk from one class to the next because it's just so far away because the campus was so big, And I remember after when I went to orientation that summer, my orientation was in July, and Ohio State was on quarters back then. Now they're on semesters like everybody else. But so we didn't start classes until like the third week of September. So everybody else has been in school like 5 weeks already, and we're just now starting classes. So I did my orientation in July. And after orientation for that weekend, and me and my parents was down there, I was like, I can't do this. I mean, the place was too big. There was probably 4,000 or 5,000 people. No, I was probably about 2,500 at my orientation. The first day, I didn't see another Black person.
Wow.
The second day, I met my friend Drew, you know, and we were the only Black people that were there that entire weekend.
Really?
I was like, I said, "Ma, I can't do this." Da, da, da. And my pops was like, "Well, you can't let other people." Da, 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 da. And my mom, ever the supportive one, always she said, "Baby, I need you to at least go through this whole first year." And she said, after your first year, if you feel like this is just not where you want to be, she said, then by all means, you can transfer to someplace else that you'll feel more comfortable. She's like, but don't give up before you've even tried. And I'm like, that makes sense.
Don't
And
give up.
I went out there my first day on campus. I met, my friend Tariq, who's from New York and from Brooklyn to be exact. And so, and he's still one of my best friends to this day, 30 years later, but I got a chance at Ohio State to really meet people from other cities. And you start finding out that, man, you know what? Whether you're in Cleveland or New York or LA or Chicago or Detroit, the inner city is the inner city, and so we've all got pretty much the same stories. Resources are limited, opportunities, are limited. You'll see a lot more people that are down on their luck. You'll see all other types of social problems, that are there. You'll see gangs, you'll see violence, you'll see all of those types of things. And so many of those things can sidetrack you, discourage you, make you apathetic, even make you hopeless, if you allow it. So the question becomes, the only way that you make it out of those environments is by the choices that you make. You've got to make more good choices than you make bad choices. And that's the only thing I tell young people now. If you make more good choices than you make bad choices, and you avoid making catastrophic choices. I define catastrophic as those choices that set your life back 5, 10 years. If you can avoid those things, you'll be okay. You'll
Yeah.
be okay. And that's what I probably my biggest lesson, from growing up, in that kind of environment. I mean, I've had a lot of friends that were dead or in jail before we were 18.
And that, yeah,
You know,
that's huge though. I mean, living in the city, you see that a lot. You hate to be exposed to it, but you learn quicker. You grow up quicker. You learn how to
right?
handle stuff a lot better than the average person because you're
Yeah,
seeing it left
yeah.
and right
You have no
firsthand.
choice. Yep. You have no choice. It's either you're going to learn it, or if you don't learn it, you're going to find yourself being taken advantage of and preyed upon because you didn't learn it. So you have to learn it because
And your
that's the
parents,
only way you're going to be able to
well,
survive.
I was thinking too, your parents probably try to keep you away from that group, man. They're like, nah, nah, you stay with these friends here. Don't hang out with that group, right?
Yeah. I always remember we had a back then in the early 80s. So I'm probably 8, 9, 10 years old. And the biggest gang in the greater Cleveland area at that point was a gang called the Brick City Outlaws. Everybody called them the BCOs for short. And I remember the BCOs came to they were recruiting me to be a member. I was 10. They had a junior BCOs, and that's what they wanted me to be involved. So that's what the little kids my age could get into the junior BCOs until you were old enough to become a BCO. And I had no desire to do that. I didn't want to be in the gang, one, because my mama would kill me, and I knew it.
Yeah.
And they came to the door, um, to my house to come and recruit me. And my mother, I answered the door and I'm telling them, man, I can't do that. Da, da, da. And my mother came to the door and they were respectful, but, they were still adamant that I basically really didn't have any choice on this matter. And my, so the guys, they're talking and my mom went, she said, I'll be right back. And so she left me there talking to them. And she went and she got my dad's 38 from behind our bar. And she came back and she put the gun to the guy's head. And she said, there's only one gang in this house, and that's the Davis family. Now get off my porch. That was the end of my recruitment.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody else was approaching me, and and everybody knew my mother was really soft spoken. Didn't really say a lot, read a whole lot. She went to work and she came home. She wasn't one to party, and she didn't do all of that. Even though when she had me, when she turned 20 years old, she changed her whole life. Her whole life became about doing something to make sure that my son can be as successful as he want to be. That was her dream became me. That was her dream. It was doing everything that she could so that I can have the best possible life. As when I look back and remember that as a kid, seeing her do that, and it was just like, wow, but it was like one of those many things that I would see over the course of my childhood where I realized, what, my mom is really not to be messed with. Like, she's not playing. and everybody figured that out, pretty quickly that, hey, Dee Dee might be soft spoken, but Dee Dee ain't playing, especially when it comes to her son.
Yeah, don't be playing around. And I can only imagine when word got out about that. Mimi put a gun to dude's head, and you won't believe what I just heard from the neck of the woods. You wouldn't. I can only imagine how the rumors, the stories, and everything that just broke out from that. But that's incredible from your mom, though. I mean, that says a whole lot. The fact that she did that, she was making a point. And you said they never messed with you ever again, never tried to recruit you after that.
Nope.
It was smooth sailing. Thanks, mom.
Right. Exactly. But I think those kind of things have, and that's the thing that I've always tried to provide for my kids. That for me, I think the best thing that you can do as a parent is to provide your kids with a sense of security. That if they come to you, that you're going to be able to help them with whatever it is. And I always felt that way. Like, hey, look, if I go tell my mom or I go tell my dad, they're gonna get a resolution to this, and because more often than not they could, and even when they couldn't, it wasn't because they didn't try, that I knew they were always going to go to bat for me. And I think that is so important, for a kid to have that level of belief and faith that your parents are gonna have your back. And even when you screw up, your parents are going to be there to help you pick up the pieces again.
And just
There's a
having, I mean, just
discipline involved for you screwing up, but they're going to still help you pick up the pieces and start over.
yeah, and I'm just thinking too, it's just having that reassurance, that confidence in your parents, and knowing that no matter what, like you said, they have your back. That's incredible. All right, when you're starting to get into college a little bit, let's kind of step back a little bit, go back into high school. Tell me what that was like. Freshman
When I
year
was,
all the way up to senior year. What was going on?
yes, I tell you, when I started junior high school, we still stayed in the projects. But midway through my seventh grade year, we moved to Warrensville Heights, which is a suburb of Cleveland. But though we moved to Warrensville Heights, we moved to what was essentially the project parts of Warrensville Heights. So it was like having a lot of the same people that I grew up with, but we were just in a better environment. So instead of us being in those projects that I was raised in for the first 12 and a half years of my life in Cleveland, I was in the projects, but they were now in Warrensville Heights. So it was better. So it was a better school system. Things looked better, but a lot of the same people, same types of people, should I say, that I was dealing with growing up down in the projects in Cleveland. I was dealing with a lot of those same types of people, just in a different environment, but Warrensville gave me some opportunities to do some different things, to have some different experiences, and so that kind of got me, better prepared for when it was time for me to go to college. So I graduated from Warrensville Heights High School in 1991. High school, I didn't. I got a chance to play football briefly, but my mom made me quit the football. Well, I won't say she made me quit the football team. What she did is she gave me a choice. She said, "You're 15 years old now, and you're old enough to be able to get a job and do some things for yourself." She said, "So we're not giving you allowance no more because you're older. So what you need to determine is it more important for you to run out there with a football in your hand, catching passes, because I was a receiver? Is it more important for you to do that? Or is it more important for you to be able to have money in your pocket?" So I unfortunately quit my job. I mean, quit the football team in 10th grade and went ahead and got my job. And when my parents did that, they also did the other thing that went further. When I got my job, my parents cut me off. So the only money that they would give me because I was working was if it wasn't Christmas or my birthday, and anything, because they said, you need to be able to save your money. So they taught me those lessons of saving up money to get what you want. And I remember my very first paycheck in This is 1988. Minimum wage in the state of Ohio in 1988 was $3.45 an hour. So that's what I made working at a place called Mr. Chicken. And my first paycheck was $66 or some change. I don't remember what the change was, but I remember the big number, $66. And I got paid every week at Mr. Chicken. So I got my paycheck that Friday night, and I had all these plans for what I was going to do with this money. And this is when they hit me hard first, of realizing how much things actually cost. You don't know that when you're not buying stuff. You know, when your parents are just doing everything for you, you don't take into account costs. All you know is I want such and such. Mom, dad, give me such and such, and they take care of it. You know, but when you got to buy it yourself, now you become aware. And I wanted a polo shirt because there was a party on that Saturday night that I wanted to go to, and I wanted this new polo shirt. And it was a polo sweatshirt, and it was $95.
Oh,
So I went to my dad, and I said, hey, I need $40 so I can buy this polo shirt to wear to this party tomorrow night. He said, didn't you just get paid? And I was like, yeah, but my check was only $66. And he said, and how much is this shirt that you want? I said, it's $95. So I need another $40. And he said, okay, I'll loan you $40. So he gave me $40. I went up to the mall, got my shirt, went to the party the next day, getting all these compliments on my shirt and feeling good about myself. Monday morning roll around, and I'm getting up, getting dressed, and I was like, Mom, ain't no money on the dining room table. She said, money for what? I said, lunch. I need lunch money. You always give me lunch money, and plus I need money so I can go ahead and get my bus pass and stuff to go get back and forth to work. She said, don't you got a job now? And I said, yeah, but I was like, but Mom, I spent that. She said, what you spend it on? I said, well, remember, I bought that polo shirt that I wore to the party. She said, let me get this right. You spent your whole paycheck on a shirt for you to wear to a party? I said, yeah. She said, I want you to remember that when you're hungry at school.
oh man.
And she left and went to work.
Wow.
And she said, I want you to remember that when you're walking from school to your job rather than getting on the bus. The next Friday I got paid. I worked more hours, so my check was like $105. So I'm like, yeah, I got more to do. And my dad said, you got my $40? I said, what you talking about? He said, the $40 from last week. I said, you gave me $40 last week. He said, no, you got a job. I loaned you $40.
Oh.
And he made me give him that $40 back. And I gave him that $40 back. And then, so with the money I had left, I bought me my bus pass. I set out my money, for my lunch money for the next week. And then the money that I had left over was mine. And so that was I didn't like the way they taught the lesson, but it was an invaluable lesson on learning how to budget your money, learning what's important, what are the things that I absolutely have to take care of before I start, kicking it and having fun. What are the things that I absolutely have to take care of? And that would be a lesson that will go with me to this day.
Lesson learned.
No, it was a hard way to learn it, but I'm appreciative, that they taught that lesson. And so my high school years were pretty much, like that. I was a good student. I did a lot of partying, did a lot of working. Nothing. I would say nothing pretty much out of the ordinary.
So how long was it before you decided that you knew what you wanted to do with your life, your calling?
My pastor told me when I was 14 that I was going to be a preacher. He said, and I always remember the words were, it takes a preacher he said, a preacher knows another preacher. And I said, no, dude. And I love my pastor. He was definitely another father figure for me, and still is to this day, even though my wife and I are at a different church now, but he's still somebody that is incredibly important to me. But I'm like, no disrespect, Pastor, but I have no desire to do what you do. I mean, seeing all of the stuff that you got to go through and all of the whining and complaining that people have, like, I don't have no desire to do that. And I didn't, so it certainly was not my intention to do that. Mine was always what I was focusing on doing was getting into law and eventually getting into politics. And that was what I wanted to do, but I'd say though he says he told me at 14, I'd say when I became acutely aware that the Lord was calling me to preach, it was 1998, and I ran for about 5 years until I accepted my calling.
You're like,
Yeah.
how many times? Okay, ask
Yeah.
yourself, how many
But
times?
when I was running, the funny thing is I was running, but I was also still very involved in church. Because I didn't get accepted into law school the first time around coming out of undergrad. So I ended up having to go back to school. I got a paralegal certification and then reapplied to law school, got in the second time. So by then I got a full-time job. So I'm working full-time, working at the Child Support Enforcement Agency here in Cleveland. And I'm commuting 3 days a week to drive to the University of Akron in the night, in evenings from 6 to 9 p.m. But I'm still very active in my church, and so here it is now. And so the same time that I'm starting law school is the same time that the Lord is telling me what he's calling me to do. And that's a conflict. Like, not first of all, I don't want to do what the Lord's telling me you want me to do. I don't want to do that at all. But then the other thing is I'm trying to start law school. Those two things, they just didn't match up for me. So what I would do is I caught myself negotiating with God. So I literally was telling God, like, okay, listen, I'm not going to do this whole preaching thing, but I tell you what I am willing to do. They've been asking me to start teaching Bible, to start teaching Sunday school classes for the teens. I'll do that, So I did that for about a year, and it would go in about 6 months to 1 year cycles. And then the Lord would intensify the calling a bit more. And I'm like, okay. Look, I'm not going to do this preaching thing, but I tell you what, they told me they need another teacher for Bible study on Wednesday nights. I'll volunteer for that. So I'll start teaching a young adult class for a Wednesday Bible study. Like, oh, and then we'll go along with that for a little while. And then it intensifies the calling again. I'm like, okay. I tell you what, I'm not doing this teaching thing, but they've been telling me that, they're everybody's recognized, what I'm doing, and they respect me, and they've been asking me to be a deacon. I'll do that. And the funniest part that I laugh about looking back now is, though I was running from the ultimate calling on my life, but meanwhile, I was taking on more spiritual responsibilities while I was running from God. So I wasn't doing ultimately what he was telling me I'm supposed to be doing, but I was still getting closer to him because I'm doing more and more things that are designed to make me have to focus more on him. But the day that I accepted my calling, my pastor had preached a sermon on what constitutes good religion. And, he gave us like this little spiritual checklist. And I was going down the checklist and I was like, oh, yeah, check. I'm doing good there, doing that. Ooh, no, I'm not too good on that one. All right, good there. Ooh, yeah, got to work on that one. So I was feeling pretty good on myself about this checklist. And they opened up the doors of the church. So I'm standing up there with the other deacons, giving people the chance to come and accept Christ. And I hear...
Commercial break, everybody. Melvin was beginning to tell us before we went to break that he was running from the calling from God. And I mean, even though he thought he was running, he was still fulfilling the promise. He little didn't know, but he was beginning to touch on. So he was sitting up there with the deacons.
Right. So I'm sitting up there with the deacons, and here go the Lord says, okay, yeah, you're doing good on this checklist, but you're still not doing what I'm telling you to do. And I'm looking around at the other deacons because I can hear this voice. So I know everybody else got to hear it. So I'm looking at everybody, and nobody is paying any attention. And I'm like, why can't they hear what I'm hearing? So I'm freaking out, you know.
What
And
the?
you know, and the next thing I know, he's telling me that you're gonna have to make a choice. Are you gonna do this my way? And I'm, still trying to get involved in what I'm supposed to be doing. And the next thing I know, I'm jumping up and down. But I'm not trying to jump up and down. I'm trying to stop myself, but I can't. And then I'm crying uncontrollably. And then the next thing I know, I'm taking laps around the church. Now, there are many people that's their form of praise and worship. They do those types of things. At that point in time in my life, I didn't do that kind of stuff. The closest I got to shouting, I mean, I can clap my hands, I can say amen. That was about as far as I got. So the whole jumping up and down and the crying and the running, that just was not me. But he scared me so much that day that he physically took control of my body. After service was over with, I went to go and talk to him, and I was on the finance ministry as well. So I was a deacon, plus I was on the finance ministry for handling the money. And so I get downstairs with the rest of the finance ministry, to talk, and I walk in, and my pastor's sister was also on the finance ministry. And she said, "How you doing, son?" And I always called her mom. And I said, "Oh, mom, I'm doing good." And she said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yeah, I'm ready to get to work." She said, "Boy, that is not what I'm talking about." She said, "Are you ready to go ahead and do what the Lord is calling you to do?" And I'm like, does she know? Did she hear it? So that's what I'm thinking. But it wasn't that she hear it. She just knows. She said, "Boy," and so I'm thinking this in my head. And she said, "Boy, I have known since you was a kid that the Lord had a calling on your life.
Wow.
The only question that you got to figure out is when you going to stop running." She said, "Because what just happened upstairs in that sanctuary, that's going to start happening a lot more."
Wow.
And after we finish, and I'm, got to take the money and the receipts upstairs and put them in the safe and have a conversation with the pastor about, what the receipts were and all the different areas. And I told him, I said, "Pastor," I was like, "I'm ready." He said, "Ready for what?" You playing funny. I said, I don't want to run no more. I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to accept my call. And he was like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "So how you know that you've been called?" And I said, "God made it. If it wasn't clear before this morning, he definitely made it very, 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 very clear." And he started laughing. He said, "Son, you're gonna be all right." And from that point, that was November 2003. I have embraced that call, and haven't looked back.
Now, before you actually became a preacher, did you ever find yourself like with your friends, just you'd get into that moment and you start kind of preaching to them from time to time?
One of the things that I think kind of separates me from a lot of people is when I started changing my life after I graduated. I went through a whole lot of crazy stuff that happened my senior year at Ohio State, so I didn't get, you heard me already allude to that, I didn't get into law school the first time around. But not only did that happen, but I was engaged at that point in time, and I found out that my fiance, who was my high school sweetheart, was also cheating on me.
Oh man.
So I lost the woman that I thought that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Beginning of my senior year, I had two people that were really close to me die. One was my maternal grandmother that summer, and then a couple of weeks after her, one of my mentors in my fraternity, Melvin Woodbury, passed away. So they were within like a couple of weeks of each other. So over the course of probably about 6 or 7 months, like everything that I had put in front of God, he was literally taken away. And so now I was president of the chapter of my fraternity, and we got in trouble for some guys that was online, one that got hurt. And when hazing violations happen, the first person that the universities come for is the chapter president.
Yep.
So I was looking at potentially getting kicked out of school and or going to jail.
Wow.
This is 4 months before I graduate from college. And so I had the proverbial midnight moment with God, and I'm crying out to him in a way that I never had before in my apartment in the dark. And I said, Lord, I promise you, if you can get me out of this mess and you allow me to graduate, I promise I will rededicate my life to you. And when I walked across that stage, June 7th, 1996, he had done his part. And when I moved back home in July '96, a couple of weeks later, I joined my church that I would be at for the next 25 years until a couple of years ago. And, I started living my life different. But as I live my life different, I didn't try to force how I was living my life onto other people.
Yes.
So instead, I wanted to just be a light. If I just do the things that I'm supposed to be doing, and people that know me and have been around me and remember the stuff that I used to be doing, the fighting and all of the womanizing and all of that stuff that I did, those people can see like, man, he's different.
Mhm.
And that's what I focused in on doing rather than trying to change other people. But I'll say for my closest friends that really witnessed that transformation, you know, it was hard for them because I slowly started pulling away from doing stuff that we had always done together, So all of a sudden, I mean, we're 23 years old. I'm already losing my taste for being at the club, and I'm like, I wasn't condemning the club or the people in the club. It was just like, there's nothing here for me anymore. I'm slowly pulling away from drinking anymore because
Hold on, wait.
I
I want to ask
didn't
you.
get into it.
I want to ask you a question because I had the same, like, kind of same experience. And I got to that point where I was at clubs or in bars, and I swear I would hear a voice inside within that would say, like, "What are you doing here, man? Why are you here? This is not what I got for you, and this is what I'm not calling you to do. Why are you hanging out in this place?" Did you ever feel that way at all? Because I used to feel like that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, and I literally I'd be sitting, I'm at the club, but I ain't on the dance floor like I would normally be
No.
because I really don't want to be here. I'm here because my best friend wanted to be here,
Yeah, you're there because your friends are there, but
and so I'm here with him. I got a drink in my hand, but I didn't babysat that drink the whole night. I mean, normally I would have killed this thing the second I got it, and had two, three, four more, after that. But it's like, so, like after probably about a year and a half or so of doing that, I was like, you know what, that's it. I'm done. I'm not doing the club scene, anymore. Like if I did it, it'll be like if one of my closest friends was having a birthday party and they had it at some place, I would show up exactly when it starts. If they said it was starting at 8 o'clock, and it was going to go 8 until, I would show up at 8 o'clock and I would leave at 9.
yeah.
So I can show my face. I'm there to support my friend or I'm there to support my cousin, but then I'm out, because everything else that's likely going to happen is going to happen way after 8 o'clock. And I'll be at home and in my bed before when nonsense is happening.
Prepare for the next day while everybody's out there still enjoying that day.
No, so I mean, but that's the way that I've kind of always dealt with that, and I think that's a hard road to walk for a lot of people when you're trying to make these changes. You're making these changes, and especially you're making the changes, and your heart is changing in the process. And so, as your heart is changing, that means those things are really taking root in you, and it's hard to not do things in a judgmental type of way, and so I always wanted to make sure that I was not doing that. I didn't want to come off like I was judging anybody else. All I'm saying is what I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
I'm taking control over my own life. You can do whatever you want. This is what I'm doing or not doing, as the case may be.
Kind of feel a question coming on from somebody that's watching right now. Kind of talk to the individual that's kind of going through a similar experience or where they're at bars and stuff and they're kind of hitting that fork in the road finally where they need to make the decision they want to get out of the bar but they don't know how to. What advice do you have for that person?
I'd say in my book, in one of the chapters, it's called "You Got to Be All In," and so part of it is from the when the Cavs won the championship in 2016. The season slogan was "Being All In," and I think it's the same thing in this Christian journey, that you got to be all in, and part of being all in is you got to firmly make a decision that I'm going to be on God's side. And when you make that decision, all of the other things get easier for you to do, but you first got to make the decision, and that becomes the harder part, because you're being tugged at, by each side, and at some point you got to make a decision, because you can't straddle the fence. Many people have tried, no one has been able to do it. You can't straddle the fence, you got to make a choice, and once you make your choice, you'll feel better, and it'll all the choices that come after making the choice get easier to do once you make the choice.
Amen. Amen. Well said. Well said. Because yeah, like you said, once you get out of there and you make that decision to never return unless it's, like for a special occasion, I mean, life kind of just takes off on its own. It gets so much better too.
Yeah.
I know whoever's watching, you probably feel like you're leaving your friends behind, but if you feel that calling, man, that you're not supposed to be there anymore, or you're just not interested in it, don't be afraid to step away.
Yeah.
Take that
And
leap.
I think And the hardest thing and I remember when I was going, like my dad went through early in my college years, like my sophomore year of college, he went through a little phase, but it was a phase for him, literally, so he went through he had an early midlife crisis, and, he was rethinking all of the decisions that he made when he was in his 20s and feeling guilty. And he turned to the church and started going to church all the time. But it was a phase for him, though,
Mhm.
you know, and so a lot of people, once, because he wasn't going to bars no more, wasn't going to after hours joints, he was going to work, coming home, going to church on Sunday, going to Bible studies, that's what he was doing now. And so a lot of the people that were supposed to be his friends, now that he wasn't the life of the party no more, they didn't want to be around him.
They're like, who is this
And
guy?
so, yeah. So here I come 5 years later, and he sees me, looks like I'm about to do what he did. And so he wants to warn me, not to tell me to not do it, but to warn me what's coming,
Mhm.
you know. And I said, Pop, I said, I thank you for the warning. And I said, I'm not concerned about that. I said, at the end of the day, I said, this is not a phase for me. This is a way of life. This is who I am. This is what I'm about now. And if people love me, they'll accept that.
Mhm.
It's just that simple. And if you can't, as much, because he asked me about my closest friends, my friend Ricky and Leonard, been my road dog since we was 12 years old, and it was like, well, what about, if it cost you your friendship with Ricky and Leonard? I said, I don't think it will, because we love each other like brothers. And I said, but if I'm wrong and they can accept these changes that I've made in my life, then they will go. If you're asking me, am I going to choose God or I'm going to choose them? I'm going to choose God. I said that's just how that will go, and thankfully I wasn't forced, to have to choose. It was hard for them, but they accepted it. Like, hey, there's just certain things that Mel ain't doing no more, and life went on.
Mhm. How many people followed your footsteps after you took that leap and kind of started, just following that way of life?
I say my two closest friends that go all the way back to like junior high. I don't think they ever took those steps, but there were other little parts, that they would do. But some of my friends from college, my closer friends from college, would begin taking those steps, with seeing me like, man, Mel really serious about this thing, and that starts rubbing off. But I think the thing that God gave me that I really had no idea when I first joined my church, and my pastor told me he wanted me to work in the youth ministry. And I'm like, work in the youth ministry, like I can't do. To me, I thought about the people that worked in the youth ministry when I was a kid and this and what they knew and the scriptures and all that. And I was like, I don't know what they know. I can't do what they did. So I didn't feel like I was worthy to work with kids like that. But I wanted to be obedient. This is what he said do. And I said, okay, I'll do it. So since I knew I fell short doing that, even though I was working on getting better in those things, you know, but I decided that, you know, what I was going to do is I was going to focus on building relationships with the kids. I was going to make sure I knew everybody, I knew every single kid in the youth ministry. I didn't, not just their name, but who their families was, what their background was, what they want to do, you know, with their lives, what school they go to, where they live at, what kind of challenges that they're dealing with. So I focused in on doing those things. And ironically enough, it's something that I would tell people, you know, over the years now is the way that I went about it is by far the best route to go. Because the reality that I've learned from ministering to young people for 25 years is a saying that I heard some years ago. I don't know who made this quote, but it is so 100% true. It says, young people don't care about what you know until they know how much you care.
Mhm.
And I didn't know that's what I was doing at that point in time. But the fact that I was focusing in on building these relationships, that means I was really touching hearts and establishing those relationships and building trust with them. And so as those other things fell into place, you know, for me, I was able to have conversations with those kids and minister to those kids in ways that nobody else could because I had established a relationship with them that says, I care about you.
And
You
that,
know,
I
so
mean,
somebody else couldn't say, I could say, like, I earned the right to yell, to scream, to go off because they knew, hey, you know what? Hey, brother Melvin loved me. I know he got my back. I was on just about every kid in my church. I was on just about everybody's emergency contact list. It was their parents and me. So I could go up to the school whenever I felt like it. If they school knew if they couldn't get in touch with their parents, they can call me.
how
You know,
how
kids
awesome
was
is that though?
supposed to do. I was the first person to reward them. But when you wasn't doing what you were supposed to do, I was also the first person to check you. You know, and so I earned the right to do the checking because they seen me do all of the other things that showed them that I care. And far too often as adults, that's the part that we miss. We miss the relationship part, you know. And the one thing that I've learned most in ministry in general, as a general principle, is that God always intended Christianity to be relational. And if you don't establish the relationship, then people aren't going to hear, well, they'll hear you, they just won't listen to anything else you're saying.
I'm like, who's this guy?
Right.
I mean, and that's important too. It's like what you touched on is like building relationships with the kids, man, and people all together. It's just showing people that you care, show them that
Yep.
love, you know. And it's so dismissed nowadays. People are afraid to show that side of it anymore because they're afraid of getting hurt. But you did it, man. You said it clear as day. It's like you want to build a relationship. That's what you got to do. To show them that you care. Show them that you're always
And,
going to be there. You're going to be there
and
to bless them.
sometimes it's not even a scared to do it, it's don't know how because maybe nobody ever did it with you.
Hmm.
And so if you come from a background where this is not what was done, then you don't know how to do it, you know. But for me, it was just I think this is the only thing that I can. This is going to be my contribution. That was the way I sold it to myself by saying this is going to be my contribution. I can't quote all of these scriptures the way Minister Andre Brooks could, who was our youth pastor at the time. Like I can't do that, you know. But hey, I can meet these kids where they, hey, I can go play basketball with them. Hey, I can go play football with them. Hey, I can come to their football games and basketball games and track meets and cheer on the girls when they, you know, they doing cheerleading. Like I can do those. I can do those kind of things. But those kind of things were foundational to what I would be able to do later on because those relationships matter. And that group of kids, when I first came to my church in 1996, that core group, two of those kids are senior pastors now. One has a PhD. They're about 10 college graduates. Like, I had no idea the kids that were in front of me, what they would end up going on to do in their lives, and the fact that God allowed me to play a small part, in that. Well, I always define it as a small part, but they all tell me like your part was not small, at all. Even my pastor's son, says that. And it's like, so, those are the things that I think are the most rewarding things you can have, in ministry, when you know that you really made a difference, because ministry can be a thankless thing, but knowing that, hey, I made it a difference, and you won't be able to reach everybody. That comes with the territory too. You're not going to reach everybody, but if you can reach one person and you made a difference in one person, there's a lot of people that go to their graves not knowing that they made a positive impact on one person.
And just thinking back to like when you were trying to make a deal with God, like, I'm gonna do it like this, if you do so and so, I'm gonna still try to do this over here, and God's kind of like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. We'll see about that, but I got something else in plan for you. But go ahead, keep trying to run. But once
It's
you,
just like that old saying. It's like, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. That's pretty much how it was. I think when I was doing my negotiating, I know God had to just be sitting back laughing, like, is he serious? Is he really? How are you gonna negotiate with somebody that got all the power?
like, oh really?
Like, I can't offer him anything.
Oh really?
But he didn't say no. He didn't say no, Melvin. That's unacceptable. He's like, okay, go ahead,
Because we
try
got
that.
that just a free will, man. God gives us that free will, and he's like, okay, but I'm still, we're still gonna work this out. We're gonna make this happen eventually. You have to
Because
give
he
in eventually.
because he knew I was still, even though I was running, I was literally running towards him, not knowing that that's what I was doing. I was running, but I was running towards him, and he's like, okay, well, you eventually you're gonna get over here to where I'm at.
And that's the beautiful part of it all is here we are trying to make a deal with God, but all in all, we're still going with His plan and not knowing it, but God's still working in our lives, and that's what He was doing to you at that moment. Still
Mm-hmm.
working with you as you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do it this way, and kind of He's like, oh yeah, and as He's planting His seed on you here and there, and you're like, and then once it finally happened, it was just kind of just natural. You're like, oh, here we are, we're doing this, we're doing this now.
Exactly.
So what was it like once you first got out there and started preaching? Do you still remember it like it was yesterday when you first got out there to the church and started
Oh,
preaching?
oh yeah. And I think the one thing when I went to seminary, I realized that I had such a different call story than so many of my colleagues, because most of the people that I went to seminary with were telling me horror stories about they knew that they were called, and they were telling people that they were called, and people doubted it or didn't support it for one reason or the other. Mine was exactly the opposite. So the first person you have to tell is your pastor, and then my pastor has to announce you to the congregation, and the congregation embraced me 100% because they've watched me. At that point, it's been 7 years that I've been there. And so they've seen the growth over 7 years, And so what I got from everybody was, what took you so long? And I mean, and that was just refreshing. It was always, just 100% support, and so many of those seasoned saints that I remember that have gone home to be with the Lord now, but they saw things in me as a 23-year-old kid that I just didn't see, and they were 100% right. I just didn't see them, at that time, but they knew, and it amazes me. But so it was just walking after that. Once I did it, it's like every other thing that I've ever done in my life. Once I commit to something, I'm gonna be all in. I'm gonna do everything I can to do it the way that I'm supposed to do it. And that's just who I am as a man. Once I commit, hey, I'm in this. I've never been one of those people to be playing the spiritual hokey pokey and put your right foot in, you put your right foot. Like, no, you got to be all in or all out. And so once I make the decision that I'm all in, I'm all in.
So, being that happened, did you end up still get involved in law at all?
So what I end what my wife still gets irritated from time to time, but so I graduated from law school in 2002. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna take a year off before I take the bar exam. Now, my goal was always to get to work in government. That's what I wanted to do, even as a lawyer, you know. And during that year that I was taking off, I ended up getting a job working as the clerk of council for the city of East Cleveland, which is another suburb of Cleveland, albeit a poorer suburb, but still a suburb, So I got this job. And then I'm like, well, I'm getting a chance to do what I really wanted to do. I don't need to be able because I had already lost my passion for really wanting to practice. So it was like, you know what? I'm gonna take the bar exam just so I could complete that phase. But I'd already decided I really didn't want to practice. And then I got the job and I was like, well, I don't need the bar exam at all. And so I never took it, and so a lot of to this day, and a lot of people in my family and my friends, have been, dumbfounded slash mad because, they wanted to have a free attorney, you know,
Yeah.
that could do stuff for them. But, I mean, at the end of the day, like, well, you wasted it. And I'm like, I said, no, I never look at it as though I wasted it. I said, yes, I'm not practicing. And I said, but I use my law degree the same way somebody would use an MBA. And I said, getting a JD gives you analytical reasoning skills. And I'm like, so those are skills that I use on a daily basis because it's about how you look at things, how you analyze things, your ability to draw analogies between two things and arrive at different conclusions, the ability to do research. All of those things are skills that I learned, by acquiring that JD. So it's still very useful to me. I'm just not in a courtroom.
Mhm. So, what is the title called that the position that you ended up getting?
That position, then I was working as the clerk of council for East Cleveland City Council.
Okay, okay. Are you still currently involved in anything now?
I worked there for about 9 years, and then I got a position working as a special assistant for then Cuyahoga County Executive Ed Fitzgerald. So it was kind of like taking what I was doing on for the city of East Cleveland and now doing the same thing in a much bigger capacity because now I'm working for the person that's heading up the entire county. So I got a chance to do it on kind of a bigger scale, more money, so
Out of all the things that you have like really taken place in your life, you ever thought about writing a book, or have you written a book?
yeah, my book just came out called Living the Transformational Life. This is a copy of the book. So it just came out in August. It was published by Christian Faith Publishing. As I tell people, it's 10 practical steps of what people can do in order to kind of take an honest inventory of where they are spiritually and then what steps they can do to draw closer to God so that they can live their best possible life. So that's what living a transformational life is about.
What? Okay. All right. All right. Okay. I'll ask him some questions. All right. Relax. Um. Well, he pretty much answered all these. Can you? What inspired you to focus on law, become involved in your field?
Which Phil? Which one?
The one that you're currently doing right now.
Oh, so right now I'm working as a legal assistant slash hearing officer for the Office of Medicare Hearing and Appeals. So in 2015, I lost my position working for Cuyahoga County, not through anything that I did wrong, but because my boss decided foolishly to run for governor, and he lost, and he was in an election year. So if he didn't win the governor race, he was just going to be without a job. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. And then the new county executive, Armin Budish, came in and he replaced 75% of the executive staff. And I was in that 75%. So I started working probably about 7 months later for my current capacity working for at the Office of Medicare Hearing Appeals. And originally, I really envisioned it really just being kind of a stepping stone job. Like, oh, okay, I'll get in here. It's a federal job. I'll stay there for maybe a year or so, and then I'll go do something else. And the something else kind of didn't come around the way I thought that it would. And as more and more time goes by, it's like, well, actually, this job is pretty cool. I get to work for I'm working for a judge. I'm learning a lot. I get raises every single year. And the biggest probably impact of me staying now is I'm like the flexibility
Mhm.
that I have. With having a young kid, that flexibility is great. My wife works as a lab technician at Cleveland Clinic, so though we both have a lot of time that we can take in terms of PTO, hers is just limited as to when she can take it. Versus with me as a federal government employee, I got all kind of pockets of time. And so that's not an issue. And then I work 3 days at home, 2 days in the office. So that just gives me a lot more flexibility with things that are going on with our daughter. If she gets sick, I can stay home. If I got to pick her up from school early, I take her to school every single day. All right, so that flexibility has really kind of kept me in the role.
All right. Next question. It says, you mentioned being a published author and a youth empowerment coach. How do these roles connect with your work as a hearing officer?
As a hearing officer, I think one of the things that I do, because the main role that we do, we're dealing with Medicare beneficiaries. And so a lot of these people are older, they're elderly, going through something. And so one of the things with the other things that I've done, in life, what my book is about, my capacity, as a preacher, is it gives me the ability to really be empathetic and to listen to people. And what I found out is that a lot of times people are calling the office and you're viewing every person as a representative of that agency. That person on the phone is that agency,
Mhm.
and you're taking out all your frustrations on the agency to that person. And so what I've realized is that as I just listen to people, and try to let them know that I understand, and I'm gonna do everything that I can, to help, it softens up those people. And so now all of a sudden, it's not Office of Medicare Hearing Appeals that they're dealing with. They're dealing with Melvin Davis. They feel like they can trust Melvin Davis. They feel like they can talk to Melvin Davis. They may not feel that way about the Office of Medicare Hearing Appeals, but they feel that way about Melvin Davis. And so that's something that I pride myself on.
Well put, man. I like that. They'd probably be calling you left and right. Can you tell me about a particularly impactful or memorable case you worked on during your career?
Ooh, geez. Um, well, career is a very long thing. So I think about all the different things that I've done. I think I'll go back to when I was working for County Executive Ed Fitzgerald, And one of the things that we had I was one of 4 special assistants, and we all had specific pockets of things that we were responsible for doing. One of the many hats that I wore was his liaison to to Cuyahoga County Council, to the faith community, and to the veterans community. So those were 3 very distinct things that were different. So anything that impacted veterans, I was kind of the go-to person because he knows that I'm a veteran and specifically an Iraq War veteran. And so I'm out of the office on a Thursday. I come in on Friday, and our director of communications comes up to my desk and she says, "Hey, did you talk to Ed?" I was like, "No, I haven't seen Ed." She's like, "Oh, well, he's out today. I thought he might have called you." I'm like, "No, what's going on?" He said, "Ed wants you to create um, a veterans card." I said, "A what? A veterans card? I mean, like what?" She's like, "I have no idea. That's just what he told me. He said this is what he wanted. He says put Melvin on it."
Wow.
Said, "Oh," I said, okay. Let me start working. So, and it's weird. I tell you what, he said military ID card program. That's what he wanted. So I Googled military ID card program, and a few things come up. And so I see that there's a few different counties that have them. And I look at Franklin County's program because from a size perspective, they're the only ones that are close to Cuyahoga County. So I see what their program entails. I copy and paste that into a Word document and I go through, make some changes to it. Then I go and have a conversation with our fiscal office to get some details on how long they think it'll take for if we were to roll out this kind of program. How long would it take? What would it look like? How much will we charge? All of those kind of things. So we've got that all wrapped up. So I go ahead and write it up, send it over, email it over to our director of communications. She's like, she reads it, calls me, "Melvin, this is great. You know what?" She's like, "Ed's out of the office right now, but he is coming in today. So I'm gonna put this on his desk." I say, "Okay, great, fine." So I'm going doing some other things. I get a call. Now it's the chief of staff, Matt Carroll. Matt says, "Hey, need you to come. Me and Ed need to meet with you like right now. We got to talk about this military ID card." I said, "Okay." So I come to Ed's office. Mind you, this is Friday before Memorial Day, 2013. And I come to the office and Ed says, "You know what, Melvin, this is great." He said, "This is what I need you to do." He said, "All right, now that you know that you've got this program together, he said, I really want to go ahead and roll this program out." And he said, "So I need you to get buy-in from some key people in the veterans community. And I want to have a press conference to roll this out at a place that is symbolic for veterans somewhere here in the city. And I want to do it Monday." So you want to do it on Memorial Day? He said, "Yeah, I think that'd be really significant, to do something like this on Memorial Day. And then I need a place, that's gonna, to do it at, that has got to be significant, that's going to be important for veterans, and then I need buy-in from some people in the veterans community, and I need them to be at the press conference." And he said, "Make it happen." This is 1 p.m. on Friday afternoon. So I've already put together a program from scratch in a couple hours, but now he wants me to get buy-in from key members of the veterans community, meaning organizations, and to organize an event on a holiday and persuade those people, if they do buy in, to show up. So I started making phone calls, and I get the associate director of the Lewis Stokes VA Medical Center to agree. She says, "Yes, no, we would absolutely accept if the county came up with this military ID card, we would accept that, as a form of ID from veterans to prove their veterans community." Great. Then I get a representative from Tri.
Back from the commercial break, Melvin was talking about veterans program that he was helping develop and put together. Okay, you can continue.
So I end up getting the executive director of Cuyahoga Community College's Veteran Success Program to say, oh, absolutely. He said Tri-C will definitely accept that military ID card program, and I'll be glad to come and attend, the press conference. So I got the two people that, say they'll agree to attend the program. Now I just got to find this symbolic place for him to have it at, so I'm calling around trying to figure out, ain't nobody even open on Memorial Day. And I ended up finding out in public square in downtown Cleveland is a place called a Soldiers and Sailors Monument. Now, I've seen this monument my whole life. I've lived in Cleveland my whole life. What I didn't know is that inside of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument is like a little mini museum in the inside. And the monument is actually to commemorate people from the city of Cleveland that actually served in during the Civil War.
Wow.
And so you go inside, it's got all these names and plaques and all of that. So I ended up calling and talking to the director, and he says, oh, absolutely, I'd love to have the executive to come down here, and he can certainly have a press conference here. So it's like, so I pulled this all together in about 6-7 hours, so it was just a long day. Got it done.
Amazing, man. Amazing. As we begin to wrap this thing up, I just simply want to say thank you, Melvin, for coming on and telling your story, or a little bit of it.
I enjoyed it, Chris.
But now, as we turn the page on this, we're kind of going to flip the script. I'm going to make it a little different. For the last little bit, you can ask me 3 questions. Anything off the top of your head. I pass you the mic.
I'd say, are you finished at the University of Toledo, or you're still a student at the University of Toledo?
I am finished at the University of Toledo. I got my associates in journalism. I did 2 years, and that's all I needed, man, because I love writing. And
Okay.
I mean, I think I kind of touched a little bit about it before, but I just always had the gift of just being able to talk to people, just having that gift of, like, wherever I would go, and that's kind of how this kind of got inspired. Is so many people were telling me their stories everywhere I was going. I traveled all over the place when I got out of high school because right away I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I ended up traveling and taking the Amtrak just about everywhere. And every time I would get on that train or, be in a different city, I always came across somebody and they would kind of, just by simply just saying hi or just having a little conversation would turn into me knowing their entire life story like afterwards. And I was always kind of amazed by it, but I didn't really think about like, oh, God's kind of blessed me with this unique gift where people are that comfortable to kind of tell me everything. But I would walk away after hearing people's stories and kind of just have it for myself, and I want to be able to share it with nobody because you go to tell somebody else like, yeah, I just heard about this guy that did all this and this and that and that, and then you're explaining it to somebody else, and they're like, that's not true. No way. No, nobody.
Yeah.
Somebody did that, and it really got me to thinking too. Is like how many people we walk by every day that have lived an incredible life, done amazing things, and yet we're kind of antisocial at times because of social media, or we're glued to our phones, and all these people are walking by us every day, and we're kind of missing out on stories. We could, just little things like that. So when I went to the University of Toledo, that's kind of what I went after because during my travels, I would always write about it. That way, if I ever, forgot my memory or anything, I would be able to reflect in my journals and, write back and like, oh, hey, I remember that. I remember doing all this, or say I did something like incredible that I didn't think I would ever do. I would end up writing about that. I always wrote about just my adventures everywhere I went, and that's what inspired me more to go to the University of Toledo, and get my journalism and associates, and this here I am now.
Has your family been? What does your family think about this for you doing this program?
Just like anybody else's, they are supportive. They watch it from time to time, but everybody's kind of like it's interesting. Like people are intrigued by it, but it's like it's still kind of growing on people. They're like, I like the idea, but podcast, And then like it's for good. It's a good purpose. It's allowing people to come onto a platform to tell their life stories and
I
share.
definitely think it's a unique it's unique. Definitely unique.
And I'm looking past that point because it's like you're sharing your story, but I'm thinking about like the future generations that come around, like your future grandkids that are coming, like how people go on Ancestry and they look for family members and stuff. I hope that one day this is still out there on the surface. Who knows what it will be in 20 years if it even be on YouTube.
Yeah, right.
But if your story's out there and they can, find it somehow, they're like, hey, that's my grandpa. Or, so and so, that's my great great grandpa, Melvin Davis. And then they get to learn more about you. That's another thing that I kind of like about this podcast. And
Right.
then also a part I love about it too is people that are kind of going through the similar situation that you're dealing with right now, or something that you dealt with in your career, and they're kind of learning from themselves by like, okay, this is what he did in his footsteps. Maybe I can do that, and that kind of can help me along my guide me. I was like, okay, that works too.
And then that's the last one. Like, would you consider yourself a mentor? And if so, what do you think the most important thing that a mentor does?
I could be a mentor for a lot of people. I mean, I think a mentor is someone that kind of keeps their word. Goes out there and does their own thing, makes it happen. No, don't just say it, but actually do it. Have somebody to look up to. Like, yeah, he always was a good guy. He always did his thing. He would say stuff, and then he would go out there and do it. He would set goals, and then go accomplish them.
Sounds good.
All right, as we wrap it up, say somebody wants to get a hold of you, Mel. Somebody wants to connect with you, reach out to you. They were touched by your story and want to know a little bit more about you, or just connect with you in some way. How can they do that?
I'm on all of the basically all of the platforms these days. I think my as I was kind of going through writing my book, I started saying, "Hey, I probably need to increase, my social media imprint." So, I started accepting more friends on Facebook. I started accepting more friends on Instagram. I had a LinkedIn account, but I absolutely positively never used it. So now all of a sudden I started doing connections on LinkedIn and I actually started filling out, the profile. And so, I can be found at Melvin Davis on any of those profiles. So I'll respond to, inbox messages, when I get them. That was the way that you and I connected was on LinkedIn. I'm being interviewed for another podcast on Friday. This one coming from a pastor in Raleigh, North Carolina, who actually sent me a message on Facebook. And so I'm like, okay, well, hey, the message is getting out, and so people are interested. I really think that living a transformational life could really help people. So I want to be able to tell it to as many people as I can.
God's just working in our lives, man. That's what He's doing. Now that you have a book published out there, kind of show the audience again what it was and where can they find it?
Uh, so it's living in a transformational life. So it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. The ebook is not yet available. It's still well, actually, it's available in Kindle on Amazon, but it hasn't hit iTunes yet. So they're still waiting, trying to get it onto iTunes. But the print edition is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And there's a couple of regular stores that it's in as well that I've just like discovered like this week. But for the most part, Amazon and Barnes and Noble's websites are probably the easiest places to order the book.
All right. As a preacher, let's end it with give us something powerful, something that leave us speechless.
To leave you speechless. One of the quotes that I've viewed, and that's another one of them quotes that I have no idea who came up with this quote, but I've loved it and have been using it for probably about 20 years to inspire people, and especially for young people. And it says this, it says, whenever life dishes you a setback, don't take a step back because God's already prepared your comeback. And I just think that that quote, is so significant because it wraps up kind of everything of how I view life, and how I view faith, that at the end of the day, we're all going to take some L's. We're all going to slip. We're all going to fall. We're going to stumble. We're going to do all of those things. But the question is not whether or not you're going to slip or fall. The question is whether or not you're going to get back up, and the whole point of Christianity, the whole reason that Jesus hung, bled, died on a cross, and rose again is to let us know that you've accepted me. You've got the power to get back up, to get back in line, and to start your journey again.
Mic drop. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching and listening. This is Chris, your host of the podcast, Tell Me Your Story. You have just heard the story of Melvin Davis. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Until next time, peace out.